You know, there's the American history we all learn in school. But then, according to the book One Nation Under Blackmail, there's this whole other story, a hidden one. It's a version of history where the world of top secret intelligence and the world of organized crime didn't just cross paths, they actually merged. And that's the incredible story we're diving into.
And really, this whole thing boils down to one pretty wild question. What if the very people we trust to protect the country were secretly partners with its most notorious criminals? The source material we're looking at says this isn't just some movie plot. It was a reality that quietly shaped American power for decades.
So how do we even begin to tackle a claim that big? Well, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll look at where this unholy alliance came from, what its go-to weapon was, how it was funded, what the ultimate political goals were, and finally, what kind of legacy it might have left behind. Now, you'd probably guess a story like this starts in some dark, smoke-filled back room, right? But according to the source, this whole thing wasn't born in the shadows. It was actually forged in the heat of World War II, born out of a moment of genuine national crisis. Okay, so picture this. It's 1942. World War II is raging, and U.S. officials are terrified that Nazi saboteurs are going to hit the critical ports on the East Coast. The Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, needs to secure the waterfront, and they need to do it yesterday. So who do they allegedly turn to? The one guy who had absolute control over the docks, the legendary mob financier Meyer Lansky. And here's the kicker. This thing that was supposed to be a temporary, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of deal for the war, it didn't just fade away when the war ended. Nope. The book argues that this alliance of convenience just morphed. It evolved into a permanent, secret power structure that would operate in the shadows for the next 50 years. Okay, so you've got this secret network, but how do you actually control people, especially powerful people who don't want to play along? Well, according to the source, the method was simple and absolutely brutal. Blackmail. You find their deepest, darkest secrets, and you use them. And right in the middle of this spider's web of secrets, you find one man, Roy Cohn. I mean, this guy was the ultimate fixer. He was the human bridge connecting politics, the media, high society, and the absolute darkest corners of the criminal underworld. And the strategy? It's laid out with bone-chilling clarity in this direct quote from the source. It wasn't about persuasion or debate. If a general or a politician stood in the way, Cohn's job was to create a compromising situation, often sexual in nature, that would force them to cooperate. It was all about manufacturing control. And just look at who Cohn was connected to. This wasn't just about mob guys. We're talking media moguls, real estate developers who would become famous, owners of major sports teams, and even powerful institutions like the Catholic Archdiocese and major players in both political parties. He built what the source calls a favor bank, a web of influence that crossed every line you can imagine. But if you really want to grasp just how brazen this network was, you have to look at who they allegedly targeted next. Because if these claims are true, they went after the one guy everybody thought was completely untouchable.
We're talking about J. Edgar Hoover, the all-powerful, seemingly invincible director of the FBI. The source claims that Meyer Lansky and figures inside the OSS, that's the precursor to the CIA, got their hands on compromising photos of Hoover with his close confidant Clyde Tolson. And the result of this leverage? The FBI, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country, was effectively neutralized. It was taken off the board as a threat to the mob's operation.
Right. An operation this big, this complicated, it needs fuel. And that fuel is always money. But we're not talking about regular money. We're talking about a massive, invisible river of dark cash flowing completely underneath the legitimate economy. And the engine for all this was something called offshore banking. It's a pretty simple idea, really. You just use banks in countries with super strict secrecy laws. That way, it's almost impossible for anyone to find out who the money belongs to or where it came from. It's basically the perfect tool for making dirty money disappear. The book calls it a daisy chain, and it worked like this. Step 1, you scoop up all the dirty cash from things like skimming casino profits. Step 2, you ship that cash to a secret offshore bank, like the infamous Castle Bank, which had ties to the CIA. And then step 3, that money, now looking squeaky clean, comes flowing right back into the U.S. to buy real estate, fund businesses, and, most importantly, to buy political influence. But here's where it gets truly wild. It's the overlap.
You look at these key banks, and the people running them, the lines don't just blur, they completely disappear. You've got a CIA-linked lawyer running Castlebank, Meyer Lansky himself controlling another, an OSS veteran involved in a third. It wasn't two different worlds working together, it was one world. Spies and mobsters using the exact same playbook, the exact same bank.
So what was the point of all this? All this money, all this blackmail? It wasn't just about lining their own pockets. No, that was just the means to an end. The real prize was political power, the ability to influence and even shape American policy from the shadows.
And this is maybe the most shocking claim in the whole book. The idea that this alliance wasn't just operating outside the law, it was actively working to help write the law. It was trying to bend the entire direction of the country toward its own interests, which often centered on things like war, massive defense spending, and secret covert operations.
Let's look at a case study, the Committee on the Present Danger. This was a hugely powerful lobby group that was pushing hard for a massive military buildup during the Cold War. So, who's paying for this? The book alleges its funding came from industrialists with deep ties to the mob. And who benefits? Well, defense contractors like General Dynamics, a company the source claims was infiltrated by organized crime. And you want to know who was a political supporter of this group out in California? A guy who would later become president, Ronald Reagan.
And what happened when the government tried to rein things in? Well, the network just went private. Take the Safari Club. This was basically a private CIA. When Congress put restrictions on the actual CIA after Watergate, this group of foreign spy agencies picked up the slack, funded by that same shadow money, and operating completely off the books. No oversight whatsoever.
So, you add all of this up, decades of these secret operations, all this money, all this influence, what are we left with? What's the real, lasting legacy of a shadow network like this?
You know, the main point of the book isn't just to tell a bunch of wild stories about spies and mobsters. The argument is that this wasn't a series of one-off conspiracies. It was a system, a persistent, hidden system of power that was woven into the very fabric of American democracy, operating right alongside and sometimes inside our official government. The book doesn't pretend to have all the answers about what's happening today. It's really just a map of a hidden past, a machine of power that most of us never even knew existed. And that leaves us with one final, really unsettling question. If this whole network of crime, money, and secret intelligence was real, if it was this powerful for this long, how much of that machinery is still running today?